want to talk about a big game design question that I use to help guide my designs, and it's, what does that incentivize? If you've seen the video about how I designed Malthus, the first boss in Super Space Galaxy, this is kind of an extension of that. So when I was first designing Malthus, I started off kind of randomly. I wasn't sure what kind of boss I wanted to design exactly, but it all worked out pretty well because I think I was guided by the right principles. So firstly I had Malthus shoot a big fireball. It was always a plan to have a big demon fireball that you'd be able to shoot later on. But what was really important to me was that this big fireball incentivizes you to keep rotating around Malthus and to force him to rotate so he can't shoot his fireball as often. And the next thing is, once you've got that cycle going, you kind of think, well, this is okay, I guess, but all I'm incentivized to do is go around Malthus forever and ever and kind of whittle him down, and that's it. So, incentives-wise, there's not a lot going on yet. In terms of spectacle, the fireball looks pretty cool. It seems appropriate. It's kind of cool looking for screenshots and stuff. I've used loads of screenshots with it. But if you're talking about incentives, so far the incentives are kind of boring, and I think this really shows how useful the incentives-based approach can be. So my next move was to make these 8-way starburst shots that kind of fill the screen with different little bullets, and they're easy enough to dodge on their own. But now you've got two different clashing incentives, where on the one hand you've got to keep moving around Malthus to avoid being hit with a fireball, but you've also got the trouble of, well, you can't just sort of go around him at any speed you want. You've got to dodge these secondary shots. So this was all designed to work well together. These things were not just designed in isolation or driven by what I thought might look cool or something, although I did try to make it all look cool. The dimension I'm really trying to look at is incentives and mixing incentives to make the game interesting. So the fireball and the starburst shots were the main features of Malthus. I also added a rotating wing shot thing. So the interesting thing there was I had an idea about staying near Malthus's mouth some of the time while he does his wing shots, and then suddenly getting this incentive to move away from his mouth as he warms up a fireball. And I think that worked quite well. I have those little moments now where everything is timed quite deliberately, actually. It's like Malthus is dancing with you. And then finally I added these green windblade things just to mix up the incentives even more and just add a little bit of interest and spice to the whole thing. Because I found just by themselves the fireballs and starburst were pretty good, but having the incentives stay flat the whole time is also a bad thing. And that's another thing you can think about if you're building these things. Once you've got a boss, you're thinking, are the incentives always the same, or are they kind of dynamic and changing? So I had the boss change phases as he takes damage.
You are weak. Your kind will burn.
But there's also things that change just over time. He goes through 3 phases. And that's pretty much how I designed Malthus, just based on incentives. Chances are I'll make some other videos about this whole what does that incentivize question, because I think it's really important for game design, and I don't think I've actually heard anybody else say that out loud exactly. So you haven't heard the last of this. Most indie game devs never finish their game. Why? No structure, no accountability, and no support. That's why I'm opening 5 private coaching spots to help devs get unstuck and finally finish their game. Message me game plan in my Discord and let's chat.